Welcome to the Market My STR show, the show made exclusively for short-term rental owners and co-hosts that actually works, so you can stop wasting time and money on short-term rental and co-hosting marketing strategies that don't work. Listen in for tips, tricks, and our book solid, move the needle, and core 4 marketing strategies. Here's your host, Scott Hill.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Market My STR show with, as you know, a very heavy slant on co-hosting, getting properties either for yourself, building a portfolio and managing them, or having people help you do that, and co-hosting or small property management. But we try to cover some things Market My STR related specifically, which is how do you get more direct bookings, build better relationships and all that. Well, if for those of you who have listened to us, you know that we have been on a painful process to get our first client, and we have great news. We have got our first client. So, Jeremy,
Finally,
time to celebrate.
Finally, only took us a little bit there, but now we're excited. It's an awesome opportunity down in 30A.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We're gonna devote an entire episode to that, so we're just gonna tease this. That we next week we'll explain how we got it, what we're doing to get more of them like it. And now our journey is legit. Now we've got to really step up because we've got a real client to serve. So very excited about that. Today, we've got an awesome special guest. His name is Michael Klein. We're going to let him introduce himself. And Michael, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, man. So let's get right into it. Tell us your story. How did you get involved in real estate with a slant in short-term rentals, possibly? I know that you're a savvy agent, but even more, like, what's your background? How you been? How'd you get here? All that. That'd be helpful.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to date myself a little bit because I actually was in short-term rentals starting like back as early as like 2014. I came out of a finance background. So I worked on like an investment bank, worked at a venture capital firm. And then at that venture capital firm, we invested in a startup that was in the short-term rental space. And this was back around like when Airbnb was just getting going, believe it or not. So again, wow. It's kind of hard to think back. Totally different world now in the short-term rental space. But that company was called One Fine Stay. And it was basically like, it was trying to address the weak points around like service and quality and curation of Airbnb. And so the initial plan was to go head to head, but eventually kind of couldn't compete with just the scale of the platform of Airbnb. So kind of more towards kind of a luxury offering. And so that was a venture capital backed company. It was a high growth. It was super interesting and messy. I was based in New York City there. I was heading up business development. So working with owners, working with developers, working with, expansion plans into the Hamptons and Miami and all this kind of stuff. Anyways, it was a great run, learned a lot, and really kind of figured out that I really love real estate because just, being in New York City, talking to owners with luxury properties, really, really cool. And that company was eventually acquired by Accor Hotels. And I kind of I stayed there for a little bit, then finally left. And I was going to do my own thing. I was like, okay, short-term rentals, that was cool. But there's probably more out there to life than short-term rentals.
No, there's not. Come on.
Well, that's the conclusion. That's the conclusion I came to. So we were going to do our own business. We were trying to do some different startups and in New York City, and then the pandemic happened. And we were kind of like, what do we do now? And we were getting out of the city and actually came to the Poconos for the first time. And we're just kind of like blown away. I think my brother-in-law kind of said, he's like, hey, you can buy a house out here for like $150,000. And I was like, that's not true. That's like as much as my rent in New York City. It can't be true.
Was that 2020?
That was in 2020. Yeah. I think we came out here like April or something of 2020.
Right before everything skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which Brooklyn at that time, we were in Williamsburg. I mean, it was like, it was like dystopian, there was nobody on the streets. It was just, so coming out to the Poconos was a complete opposite. There's trees, there's space. You can breathe some fresh air. So anyways, we were like, well, we don't know what else we're going to do, but this Poconos real estate thing seems really interesting. Let's just buy a short-term rental, we'll rent it out and kind of figure it out like everybody else in the world in 2020. So we did that. And again, we didn't really have much expectation, but we bought a property for $246,000. And in in August of 2020, we closed on it. And in 2021, we did $180,000 of revenue.
Right.
So which is kind of crazy. So at some point, I guess about halfway into that year, I'm like, the numbers are just, we're getting like $10,000 bookings back to back, like week to week over the summer.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, I was like, okay, well, we should definitely invest more in Poconos. And so that's kind of what we did. And we did that for, basically, so we bought a property in 2020, 2021, and then we were kind of like, the market was changing a little bit. We ended up buying another property in 2023. And along the way, at some point, I was literally underwriting every single deal in the Poconos, like that would come up for that entire period. But I wasn't investing that much, right? Because I only had so much capital.
Sure.
And so eventually I was like, what else can I do with all this short-term rental knowledge? So decided to get my real estate license and really with the sole focus of just focusing on short-term rentals. And so, and that kind of like immediately, just started to take off. And, I think, I closed on my first transaction like in February of 2024. And I kind of like, it's along the way, I was talking to somebody and they were like, hey, have you talked to Tyler Kuhn, this guy in North Carolina? And so I pulled him up, I listened to his podcast. I was like, yeah, dude, this guy's saying every single thing that I like, the same way that I think about, the short-term rental space. So reached out with him and then, eventually linked up and joined them in May of 2024. And kind of, and just, that's been, basically just solely focused on that and driving the really both being propelled by the market of the Poconos and then also, helping to drive the market a little bit myself.
So
Nice.
before Jeremy takes over with all his questions, the one question that comes out of me listening to you is specifically if there's a real estate professional listening to what you just said, if you're doing what you're doing as a real estate agent and then you think partnering with Tyler Kuhn might be a good idea as you've gone through it from where you were as a real estate agent to where you are, is it simply you taking your license and hanging it somewhere else, or is it a totally different model that Tyler's got going? Explain that a little bit to me.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, in general, no, I mean, you're not just hanging a license really. And so I think, the Savvy platform has, kind of, they kind of have, we have the luxury of being kind of early to a market. Right.
Okay.
And so his whole, his whole approach, Trish and Tyler, is like, we don't want to just have like 1,000 agents in every market. We really want to be methodical about delivering the best possible experience and expertise and execution in that specific market. And so, there's one agent or one team in each market, and then you kind of like build out from there in a way that's very, very sustainable. So it's very, and it's super, super focused. And I think that's one of the things that is really important because, a lot of, you can look at the stats of there's like there's a gazillion real estate agents, right? But a lot of them are kind of like part-time or they're not really focused or like, like hey, I'm going to hang my license over here. If you want to be successful in it, like, you got to like focus on, being really great at it. And also specifically with us, like we say no to, I think this is true of any savvy agent. We say no to more business than we say yes to, either because it's not in our sweet spot, right? I mean, even it translates into the deals, right? We're very selective about clients, very selective about which deals we promote. And so, we're not like out there, we're not out there like selling, a random homes, right? Where it's all about short-term rentals and it's all about short-term rental investments. So,
all right. So one follow up to that, and I'll let Jeremy take over. It sounds like, me not being real estate experienced, it sounds like it's got some cool elements that you might find in a franchise where you're building a collective brand. Everybody's pulling on this and on the same rope in the same direction, and then you benefit from the good reputation that other savvy agents are building out. Collectively, you're doing that. So it sounds like it's got cool elements of that, but yet it probably still ties very close to the way the standard real estate agent broker relationship works. Is that fair, or are there nuances of that I don't really understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually, I like that you said that because I'm coming from the startup world. So I think of things like, I kind of think of it similar to like Uber in a lot of ways when they were getting going, right? It's like, hey, we've got this great product. It works really well. And then we're not in, in Chicago yet. So we're going to go find somebody that's a great GM or that's, and they're going to open up Chicago. And as you say, right, you're creating this network effect as you go, because now I use it in Chicago, then I go back to home in North Carolina and so on and so on. But so I think that's very much, I think, what's going on, which is really, really powerful, because you can't, like, most agents are an individual business and an individual market. And so having that network is just it's a network effect, right? Like you cannot compete with that as an individual agent. But I think, all the other stuff is true about real estate brokerages and relationships. Every, real estate is regulated on a state level. And so each state has their own nuances. And so that kind of, stays in place.
Yeah.
We just we really mold, I think what, Tyler's done really well is like, hey, let's just focus on creating the maximum amount of value for the client. Let's focus on creating the maximum amount of value and leverage for the agent. And then let's try to minimize the amount of work we spend on like trying to figure out crazy real estate rules. And that's what he's done. So.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing watching the growth. No, we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So I've had the pleasure of knowing you now for several years. You sold a couple of my properties, and I'm second guessing myself here, but I haven't seen you in a while. When was the haircut? Wasn't your hair long? I feel like when I last saw you, it was long. No, longer.
It was long. Yeah, that was probably. It's a good question. It was probably earlier this year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the last time I saw you was WealthCon. And I was
Jeremy,
like,
that's an awful question to ask people who are only listening to this via audio.
Well, at least they're going to have to watch. Looks good. So just we'll go into some questions here in a minute. So 2020, 2021, the Poconos, you couldn't miss, right? Like you had $10,000 bookings. Literally anybody could put anything up at that time. Not saying you weren't doing a good job and your property wasn't great, but that was like an amazing time to be in probably any short-term rental market. So you bought your first one in 2020 for like the 200 something. I started buying in 2021 and then early 2022. Say like 2023, what do you think you could have sold the one that you bought in 2020 for? If you just had a guess.
What would I sold it for?
What do you think the sale price would have been in like 2023 for the one you bought in 2020?
I mean, so we bought it for 246. We did put some money into it, but I'm going to say it's hard. 450, 500.
Yeah. Right. Sounds about right. Like the growth was crazy over that period of time, right? I mean, I remember when me and my business partner, Tom, were buying out there, like seeing properties that had bought, sold for 75,000 10 years prior, 8 years prior that were listed for 450, 500 plus. It was definitely a crazy time to be in that market.
But what's interesting though, is that the market has continued to, a couple of things. One is that like our property was doing a crazy amount of revenue in 2020, in 2023, 2024, right? That property was still doing like $150,000 of revenue.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I never even contemplated the ability that I could sell it because I thought it would appraise for like $450,000, right?
Right.
Like, why would I ever sell it? And also, so nobody sold it. Nobody sold turnkey properties like that. Whereas if you fast forward today, I mean, I just sold that property, by the way. So I sold it for $725,000 in cash.
Love it.
Which is incredible. Only now I think, like, do you see properties like that that are turnkey and that are doing that kind of revenue actually coming to market? And if you track that, right, from 246 to 450 to 725, I mean, like there a lot of an equal amount of appreciation has come since 2023.
Yeah.
First, before.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been an incredible ride. Do you think obviously the market's very different now than it was shortly right around COVID. Do you think it's kind of regressed back to what it was prior to COVID, or is it a totally new market in terms of like competition and everything that's going on there?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I think there's because there's so many different variables.
Yeah,
I do think the general, I kind of think of like things like with investment like beta and alpha. I think the general beta of the market in terms of seasonality and demand and travel patterns has mostly kind of gone back to what you saw before 2019. But I think overall, I think overall the demand, like the level of revenue has gone up quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But you have more listings, right?
Right.
And then I think, but the biggest trend is probably that, the ones that are really professional and really offering something unique and are treating it like a micro hospitality business is something I kind of like to say. Those are the ones that are now like, they're doing just as good or better. And then everybody else is
Yeah.
kind of like,
Fighting for the rest.
fighting.
Yeah, it's definitely elevated as a market for sure. The comps, when you're comping out for your own property, you can really see that like the level of professionalism in the homes compared to what it was a few years ago has completely changed. So I think it's just overall it's exciting for the short-term rental world for those of us that are in it, as a business.
Which is a good thing, right?
Yeah,
Because
oh for sure.
all the properties are getting better. So, I just think about like the person like me that came to the Poconos. I came the first time in 2020. If I came today, I would have a different, experience and different than back then,
Yeah,
because the homes are nicer. I would have a completely different impression
right,
about the market. So overall, I think that, I think that more listings that are, in higher quality listings is going to actually grow the demand profile over
for
time.
sure.
Like, but you still have to compete. Like if you're an individual host or property manager, you have to compete within that.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Also, obviously, I'm in the Poconos, operating the Poconos, so I like the market, but I love the fact that you and your wife during COVID were like, "Oh my God, look at this luxurious Poconos that we're gonna pick up and move to from Brooklyn." So it's awesome. So why don't we talk about a little bit about like operations, maybe, and kind of your business overall. So typically we'll have people on that have like a co-host or a management business. But like as you manage, you own and operate your own short-term rentals, then you also help people purchase their own short-term rentals as a savvy agent. Maybe can you talk us through like kind of what does it look like to find clients as an agent? Maybe it's specific to savvy, but like how do you go about bringing in prospective buyers or even sellers?
Yeah, I think for a real estate agent, if you're just starting out, you kind of have to start with buyers, right?
Hmm.
But for a primary residence buyer, right? Like, if you're just looking for somebody, like you kind of have to buy leads on Zillow. They may or may not be qualified, right? Like you may or may not have a differentiation. But for short-term rentals, that's actually not so bad, right? Because there's a lot of people that are looking to invest in the market. They're looking for info. You can really, if you bring good expertise and good service, and there's actually more people, there's just more people looking for short-term rentals than will ever find a successful one. So if
Yeah.
you do a good job, you've got lots of leads out there. But I think you have to, normally you have to start on the buy side, and then as you kind of build a brand and a reputation in a market, you can get more
Yeah.
listings, because that's really more of a relationship
Sure.
kind of base.
Sure.
Base.
So to get those buyer clients initially, say somebody's starting out as an agent and they're like, I don't even know where to start start getting clients. What would you recommend besides
Well,
joining Savvy for them to do?
Scott, that's the thing is like Scott and I were just talking about it. It's like, it's literally all on social media, right?
Okay.
Like that's where
Yeah.
your clients are. And it's, because again, if you're like, not everybody's in the market to buy a piece of real estate. So if we're going to buy Google, like if you're going to like just put out banners and stuff, it's not very targeted. But what we have with social media is like you have Facebook groups, right? And so if you're in those places, there's, those are the key players, right? So you can kind
Yeah.
of find them. It's like a mini social
Sure.
network within itself. And also like a lot of times people are just active writing comments. So if you can start creating value and start to become known and have that first impression within your own social media,
Yeah.
it's kind of surprising how effective it is. Like I always say, because I never use Facebook, and then I got my real estate license, and now I'm like on Facebook all the time again.
Yeah.
So kind of, but that's where that's where a lot of people are. And of course, there's other channels too, and I think they probably skew younger or older. But starting out, like get that first impression on social media and start engaging in the places where your customers are, and just try to be known and create as much value as possible, and I'm sure good things will happen.
Yeah. I love that answer because I think that also, works for building a co-host or a management business. And it's really what Scott and I are doing. And like, being in Bill Faith's inner circle, like he always preaches being in those Facebook groups, helping owners, just providing as much value as possible and building up your name. So I love the fact that there's parallels between the two, which really just probably goes to say for most businesses these days, that's probably the best way to go about getting started. So tell us a little bit about what you have in terms of properties today that you're self-managing, and kind of like what's your long-term vision or plan in terms of like owning, managing.
So yeah, so we had we were doing this with it was my wife at the time, my brother-in-law. So we basically bought 4 properties together, but 2 of them were his. And then 2 of them were ours, and one of them we moved into because we decided to like be in the Poconos long term, and the other one was the one that we just sold. I think, and basically the reason for selling that was, we wanted to basically reinvest and reposition and so now what we're doing is actually we're basically starting the new construction business. So I'm actually closing on a new construction loan this afternoon, which is
Nice.
amazing. And so we bought 2 pieces of land. And so, we're learning a lot. So I'm always kind of like, that's my thing, is like on my journey, is that like the more I can learn, then how do I redeploy that in my own, investing journey.
Sure.
So that's the next challenge. But I think that's the beauty of real estate investment, is that you always are learning. There's always another module. There's always another challenge that you can kind of, take with you. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think our idea is, is really just to continue to, right now it's just to invest in the highest performing short-term rentals, and then probably hold on to them, and, and let them kind of mature and season until, like it makes sense to sell them,
Right.
and hold them. So that's kind of the idea. So I use the real estate business, is the way that I actually make money. And then what I can save, then I redeploy into that business, which creates this synergy, with clients. Cause,
Sure.
you're looking at deals, and you can use all that, everything you learn, you can use in both sides of your business.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to see what you're building. I know we're going to be neighbors on the lake, so I mean, you already put what I have over there to shame, so it'll be nice to see what you're putting together. Do you plan to expand outside of the Poconos, or do you think you just want to focus on the Poconos, either as like an investor and or a agent, or you just kind of laser focused on the Poconos?
Yeah, I thought at the beginning of this year, I kind of thought about it just in terms of, because a lot of people that are looking, a lot of the investors are coming from New York City, right? And so they're debating between like, Jersey Shore or Catskills or, or the Poconos. And so I was like, well, what if I got my license in New York? I used to have my license in New York once upon a time,
Sure.
but there's just so much opportunity, and there's just so much volume and kind of activity in the Poconos that doesn't really make sense. And also I think the hard part with going into other markets right now is like, where do you have more knowledge, right? Like if I can't find the Poconos, then
Right.
like who can, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of really focused on the Poconos, but I really think about stacking. Like, again, I really do think of it like an education, right? Because the beauty of real estate is that once you learn zoning, you learn new construction methods, right? All this stuff, you can take it. You could do second homes and, in
Sure.
Catskills and Narrowsburg, or
Yep.
you could do primary homes somewhere else where land is cheap and building cost is cheap, right? And so I'm always kind of thinking about how I build that. But right now it feels like I'm in the right.
Cool. Yeah, and I think too, buying a short-term rental, doing just say renovations, or now that you're doing new builds, or a new build, you could take that skill now and apply it to another part of real estate and do multifamily or something else if you really wanted to, right? To diversify outside of short-term rentals. So those skills can definitely be transferable. So just you were talking about the Poconos market. So as an agent, what does that market look like? Like what's like size of the market, just so people have like an idea? Because maybe people don't really know what the Poconos is, and it just, to them, they don't really understand like really what is available as an agent or as a investor in the market.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, more and more every day, it feels like more people do know about the Poconos, but certainly versus 5 years ago. But I like to characterize the Poconos as like a blue chip vacation market.
Hmm.
And so if you're a short-term rental investor and you're looking for a strong market, like definitely the Poconos checks all the boxes, right? And so, what are we looking for? We're looking for like, large traffic drivers, right? Or existing traffic. So
Hmm.
Poconos, over 10 million overnight visitors, right? So you have that, you have, spending power and population, within close proximity and driving distance. And I would argue the Poconos is the best from a location perspective on
Hmm.
that, like, because like if we were just close to Philly, if we were 2 hours from Philadelphia, that would be like, oh, that's a strong market.
Right.
But we've got both New York and Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
So we've got like, we've got people to burn, we got demand to burn. It's really more of a question about how do you find the right property? How do you set it up to capture that demand and create the experience that they're looking for? So it's got that in spades. And I think, and yeah, I mean, in terms of the market, I mean, it is kind of a broad geographic area. There's probably like, depending on how you define the area, there's like 10,000, short-term rental listings. So it's, I would say that it's probably like, I think short-term rentals are probably close to like half of spend or a little bit less versus hotel, kind of depending on how you define it. So if you look at both hotel and short-term rental revenue, it's probably approaching like $1 billion.
Crazy.
So it really, and that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about the market is like you can enter into the market and get like a 2-bedroom and do well, right? And so that's like at the $250,000-$300,000 mark.
Yep.
And then you can, buy $1 million property that can generate over $300,000, right? And kind of everything in between. You can choose your own adventure that way. And also, I think one of the things that's great about the Poconos is, it's not like defined by one specific characteristic. It's just woods, right? So like for the most part, there's the
And
traffic,
lakes.
the ski resorts. But it's not like 30A where it's like, how close are you to the ocean, right? And then your market opportunity erodes as you get further away. You're really at a high level, you're selling kind of space and experience, right? And nature to people on the East Coast in these urban environments. And so when you think about it that way, like that just gives you a lot of surface area to kind of think about how to like capture demand
Right.
and do interesting things.
Yeah.
So for all those reasons, I think it's kind of, that's why I'm so busy, because you got people at all different price points, and like there's all these different sorts of different opportunities, but that's also what keeps it,
Right. Yeah, I will say, probably like any market, if you can be lakefront or lake view in the Poconos compared to just in the woods, it's probably an advantage, right? Or closer to one of the ski hills. Cool. So why don't we switch, talk a little bit about technology and maybe, talking about it as an operator, but also as an agent. Like, what role does technology play? Is there like maybe one tool that you really couldn't live without for either, or maybe there's a crossover and it affects both as an operator and as a agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that's just kind of like, I think that's really amazing is just like AI, especially in the context of what I'm trying to do with new construction. Because like I'm not like a very creative person, right? But I think about like you could do a render on this stuff like in like seconds. And even as little as like 3 years ago, I would have had no idea how to do that. I would have been on like Facebook, hey, does anybody know like an architectural artist?
Yeah.
And like, and there's still use for them, right? If you want to do something really, really high quality.
For sure.
But yeah, that's like, I feel like that makes it, like I'm at the right time to actually be able to do that, just because of how easy all of that. So I don't know. I think like AI is probably the biggest one that I see. And so every day I feel like I'm using it more and more just for anything, right? Which another interesting part of that is like, because I had this, is almost you have to, especially dealing with like clients and, negotiations on two sides, right? Like nowadays you pretty much as an agent have to assume that like your seller, your buyer, right, is like, putting through, ChatGPT,
Yeah, sure.
like, is this a good deal? Or like any question that's going to come up, right, they're going to ask that. So we had a deal that, we were basically, we were off by, I don't know, like $40,000. It was like $2 million deal. And yeah, the seller was basically like, we were trying to negotiate both sides, and he was just sending me stuff from AI. He's like, oh, well, AI says it's worth 3 million. I'm like, there's no appraisal values of 2 million right now for a pretty, but I think that's just an interesting thing.
How do you control that, right? Because that's really whatever that seller is feeding to ChatGPT or to Claude, it's probably giving an answer back in that direction. Like, how do you go about explaining? Is that just, here's the data specific to comps in the area, and just hope that they pay attention to that more than what they're being told by AI?
Yeah, it's funny because it's almost like you're on the defensive, right? You have to prove that AI is wrong, as opposed to, but I think it is data, right? I had this, I mean, in some ways it's great because there was somebody asking about like, like you'll just get wrong answers about like regulations or stuff like that. So I have somebody, a lot of times I'll get that and I'll be like, no, that's blatantly false. And then I explain why. And sometimes they're like, can you send me the zoning code? I send them the zoning code, and then they're like, oh, okay. That's why we have you.
Yeah, exactly. Nice.
yeah, I think data is really the way you gotta go.
Yeah, agreed. No, I'm definitely excited about everything the AI is doing for us. You know, one of the things that I struggle with time wise, and Scott and I have talked about this, and I think I do overkill on it, but like trying to figure out income comps for a property, like being able to use AI to pull those comps faster, you know, better comps and produce those projections faster is something I'm excited about. But I'm also wondering, just in this conversation, could you do the same thing, I guess, for sales comps and as a realtor, I guess probably going in that direction too, right? To be able to use AI to pull those comps quicker and more accurately. So maybe that's something interesting coming down the pipe as well. Uh,
Yeah, I think that's the first thing you do, right? Is just run it through AI and then see what comes up, and then we go from
yeah,
there.
right. See what you can build. Typically, we'll ask co-hosts and managers like how they differentiate themselves from the competition in their market. So, as being an agent and maybe as an operator, like how do you see yourself separating from the crowd? Maybe talk about like agents and like the traditional Poconos agents compared to what like you and like the savvy model is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's why Savvy is growing so quickly, right? Is because, there aren't agents that really understand the short-term rental industry. And so if you can,
Hmm.
about like if you're dealing with an investor, right? There's a lot of real estate questions that come up, but there's a lot of like short-term rental questions that come up,
Sure.
right? Like what improvements do I need to make with properties you're doing well? How much revenue am I going to do, right? Like, who should I get to design it, or, like how do you have, all these things. And so when you think about that, the gap of knowledge for that is pretty big.
Right.
And there's just not a lot of people that have that knowledge, I guess, right? And I think the real estate industry's gone even further because the way that it kind of developed is they kind of told you not to do those things, right? They're like, you're in the real estate business, you can't do revenue projections, or you shouldn't be
Yeah.
talking about that. You're opening yourself up to liability, which is again, it's like that makes it pretty easy if you do have that knowledge, right?
Right.
So I think that's one, is just like, the domain expertise. But I think, it kind of goes even a little bit further than that, which is like, I think what kind of makes, me special in some ways is like, I am an investor, right? And so like,
Right.
really, like like I said, I was doing this for free, like 2020 to 2023. I was just underwriting
Hmm.
deals out of curiosity. Oh, and that's what you have to do to be successful in investments. Is It's not static, right? The Poconos market seems like it kind of flips over in some way every 6 months, and so you have to challenge your own assumptions, and
Right.
really be on top of the market and be curious about that. And I think having, and also having your own investment experience is really helpful too, because, like it's not a transaction, right? There's not clear answers, right? It's like, is this a
Hmm.
good investment? Like you have to kind of articulate, why, and put this in context of why we think this might be more interesting than some other investment opportunity. And I think unless you have investing experience of your own, I just think that's really difficult to do.
Yeah. No, that's a huge differentiator. Before we met you, we bought 4 properties in the Poconos with a different realtor, and then you ended up helping us sell 2 of them. And wonderful people, and we really liked them, but the difference was night and day, right? It was more of like, here are the comps that we printed out. Do you like the house, right? Like, if you wanted to buy it, there really weren't any income projections or anything that they could really think of, or suggestions on what to do with the house. It was like, do you like it? Want to put in an offer? It's like, all right, we'll do our own comps and analysis. So that's
By the
definitely,
way,
yeah,
By the way, do you like the home is not even the right question,
right,
right? Because a
right,
lot of people are like, well, I don't care what it looks like. Does it make money,
yeah,
right? Is it going to
exactly,
appreciate in value? Is it going to cash flow? Is it going to
right,
solve my financial, like,
right. And that's also, I would say, too, probably a difference with savvy is those are the types of people you're trying to work with, right? Not really that person that's just looking for a second home that like maybe they can cover some costs, right? You're really more so looking towards those investors,
it's, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point too, about like, we talk about focus and saying no to business, because I want to work with where I can add the maximum amount of value to a client.
right?
And I can't really, like, if it's a second home, it's like, do you like the countertops or
Yeah,
don't you? Like, I
right,
don't, I mean, it's up to you really. So from my experience, there's a lot less, that I can do to actually add
yeah.
value in the equation.
Right. In that type of situation, your preference is to be able to, well, one, bring your wife and get her involved to help with the design, but also be like, yeah, you can maybe keep these countertops or keep these cabinets, but you need new countertops that'll help the photo pop in your listing so you can, potentially make more money. So one thing I want to switch back to for a minute, and then I'm going to hand it off to Scott, but I want to talk a little bit more about the new build, because I think that's not like, at least for me, when I think of new build, I kind of think of like the cookie cutter communities that are like being built for short-term rentals, right? And they're all kind of the same, which is not what you're doing. So maybe just talk about that, like going down the new build route as a short-term rental investor versus the like buying and renovating. Like what are some advantages or some positive things that investors can get out of going down this new build route?
Well, I think, I mean, I haven't fully like thought it because we've been like so deep into it, but I think the first one is that I think you kind of have more control, right? And so it's similar, I would say, in some ways to like, if you're doing like a BRRRR, right? And you're looking at the
sure.
ARV and then how much we're going to put in. It's the same thing is true in new construction, because like, if you don't like, before you even buy a piece of land, right? It's like, what are we going to build and how big is it? Does the market want that? And does the land, have the space or the septic requirements or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
And then also like, what are your comps for that property, right? So if you're doing a new build, you shouldn't have an appraisal gap, right? Because like you've literally architected the entire, the end state. Of course, things go up or down, and luckily the Poconos is going up, so that's good. But I think you the debt and so what that boils down to is you have a lot more control, but you also have to think about everything ahead of time, right? So you have to do operation, a lot more planning, everything's a lot more premeditated. But that's great. So like, for example, the lakefront, and honestly, I just got lucky, right? Because there's very few lakefront lots that are buildable in the Poconos. I mean, like maybe 4 sold last year. And so I was lucky enough to get one of them. But the home that we're building, I mean, we did the new construction loan at appraised for 1.66 million, right? And our construction cost is going to be like 1.25 million. So already before we like, put a shovel on the ground, we've already got a nice equity into that property.
Yeah.
So
that's
like,
great, because because you talk about the BRRRR, and like that's what everyone thinks about when they do the BRRRR, right? Raise the equity delta between what you put into it and what it's valued at. And I don't think a lot of people think that way when it comes to a new build, or that's possible.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the most, that's one of the biggest reasons, right? Is you're trying to figure out that delta before, and lakefront again is a little bit of a wild card, because lakefronts you can bid, if you can build for let's say 250, just picking a round number, really depending on what you do with a build, but you can sell a lakefront at at 450, right? Every square foot you build, like you're kind of making money along the way. But you can do that with non-lake fronts. You just kind of have to figure out that spread in terms of your build cost and that. But that's one piece. I mean, I think the other thing that's nice about new construction in the Poconos is that in general you do have higher appraisal values, right? And so you're kind of entering in, like, I think about competition. I like to enter in, like when a competitive market, I like to enter in ahead of the company. And so if you have, age, quality, right? Like finishes, amenities, to the extent you can build them in, you're kind of entering in at the top of the market, which is nice. And so your appraisal value is higher. And so maybe you can actually get a little bit more appreciation on that. But I think the first reason why I just, at a basic level, why I wanted to kind of like even get into short new construction was the Poconos has historically not been like a luxury market. So there's not a lot of big homes, or not a lot of homes need a lot of updates and renovations. And it's like, and they need a septic upgrade and all this. And so but I knew that I had confidence, based on, the clients I was working with, that there was certainly a demand for those nicer properties, a 6-bedroom with, ceilings and all that stuff. You can build in some of those amenities like a pool into the actual build, right? Because doing it after the fact would be hugely time consuming, costly.
Yep.
So that was kind of the original idea. I was like, yeah, there's got to be like at a certain level, and this isn't for every type, right? There's different types of inventory. But for a certain level of quality, it just doesn't exist in the Poconos. And so that was kind of the idea.
Yeah. No, I think it's great thinking. I mean, anytime that I do, or I look at how properties are performing in the Poconos, really those newer, nicer homes really do exceptionally well. And I think the fact that you're also going to be lakefront just is the icing on the cake, right? That's probably just going to perform that much better. And then, the low hanging fruit stuff is probably less repairs and maintenance as you're operating. Like that's one of the biggest problems that we have in the Poconos is like the repairs and maintenance on these homes is insane. Like, I feel like after every guest, something has to get fixed or repaired. So you probably won't have that with the new build. But
Yeah,
I love this route because Scott and I plan to buy as well in our business and build. And Scott has like a vision for what he kind of sees as a new build that like focuses on short-term rentals. So I think it's a great avenue.
Yeah,
Sure.
one other point I'll say on that is just like I think with short-term rentals becoming so mature and professionalizing, like, I mean, it's all about the experience that you can create. And so
Yeah.
the more that you can kind of integrate that entire process, the
Curate
build
it.
with the end result. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's lots of examples, like we're doing an indoor pool, right?
Yeah.
As an example on that one. But I think it's like, like that's ultimately like, these are almost becoming commercial style properties in some
Yeah.
ways. I mean, that's what people want. They want these, you really exotic and unique amenities and experiences. And so I think that's kind of really that's where it really becomes super interesting, because you can actually build something that maybe would just be not possible or uneconomical in a retail environment. And so that's kind of like, that's the thread that we're on, that we're kind of leaning into. So
Nice. I love it. I think it's a great direction. Like I said, I'm excited to see what you do with it. Cool. Well, with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Scott.
Michael,
He's got some questions.
where are you located exactly in the Poconos? Because my wife's family vacations in East Stroudsburg every summer. So I was curious where you are exactly.
I live in Cresco, so it's not far from East Stroudsburg. It's kind of like north central.
Okay. Well,
By Skytop Lodge.
within months, I'll be able to drive. I'll go over there. I can write my entire trip off and come see your new build. You can walk me through the property.
Right.
100%. Would love to. Yeah.
So, just a couple more questions. Let's talk about people that you're working with. What are you seeing as the one or two top reasons people are buying in the Poconos properties, and kind of why they're doing it? Is it because of the tax benefits? Like, walk us through those couple big reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to be like too, there's always, that's the beauty of real estate. There's lots of reasons why people buy real estate, and certainly the short-term rentals, there's even more, because there's all these like unique, you can use it as a second home, it can cash flow, the tax benefits. But I think one of the interesting things is that I do think there's a little bit of a changing of the guard, in terms of just the cap rates have gone down, right? And so there's like a new type of investor that is buying for a little bit of a different reason than somebody would have bought in 2020, right? Which is purely about cash flow. And so now I think they're looking at it more like, the taxes are a huge thing. There's no doubt about it.
Sure.
And like this year is kind of crazy because, last time, in the winter, the big beautiful bill hadn't passed, right? And so we woke up in January. I remember there was like, everybody took off for Christmas. We didn't know, like, it was cost seg season, right? Everybody was looking to buy a property. Right? And then we hit the holiday. You couldn't close before the end of the year, and everything got quiet. Everybody did their New Year's thing. And then there was about 2 weeks, and I was like, I had no idea which way the market was going. But I remember I helped a client get this property in contract. And then like a week later, just like everything just blew up, right? Everybody that had been looking in the fall started looking again. They're like people that are, everybody's kind of wants to get ahead of the game, right? Because they don't know how long this bill is going to stay in place, and they missed out last year. They don't want to wait till the last minute because they realize they might miss out that way. So we literally woke up, the real estate market in Poconos woke up to a completely different environment than anybody was expecting. And so, and I do think a lot of that is being driven by people that realize this is probably one of the best tax advantages you could ever possibly get. So that's probably like the biggest trend, I guess. But I think the other trend is just general awareness around the Poconos market. because, you know, a lot of people didn't know a lot. If unless you're from the East Coast and you've come here, right, like your family, like you don't really know about the Poconos. But as people have started to look nationally for short-term rentals and people that got interested in the tax advantages, then they kind of end up in the Poconos at some point because it, you know, it's a blue chip market. And so that's the thing that's also kind of surprising to me in this, you know, this year is just how many people are now like know about the Poconos or now looking in the Poconos. It's become like a, you know, one of the top spots. If you're going to consider buying a short-term rental, you know, this year, like the Poconos is one of the top probably 5 or 10 markets that you would consider. And the reason for that, I think, is because, you know, the things that we talked about before, you can still, you know, get great cash flow. The demand is there if you build the right product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that people probably underappreciate around that is just around the possible, I still think there's a lot of appreciation left to go. Because if you look at, you know, a property in the Poconos that's doing 150,000 revenue and how much that would cost in another market like A or Smoky Mountains, Asheville, you know, you name it, pretty much the Poconos is still lower than a lot of those markets. And so until that kind of reaches equilibrium, I think you have a pretty good appreciation outlook.
Do you provide any services, or is there a way that a person who primarily wants to buy the property so that they can participate in the tax benefits, do you provide services or a way for that new buyer to get through that setting up the property phase? Like, how do you handle that with a client? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, what I guess the other trend about that is that if you're looking at it solely, well, everything's on a spectrum, but if you're looking solely for tax benefits, you really don't want to be in the real estate investment business. You want to be in the, you know, it's more of a financial instrument for you, and a tax shelter. And so you want to do the least amount of work as possible, right? And so that's why, you know, I feel like a lot of people are just looking for the perfect turnkey property, which by the way is really hard to find. It's kind of
It
like, you're like, you know, it's like buying a lottery ticket. I'm just going to wait on Facebook until something perfect and turnkey shows up. But I think there's a lot of people in that camp. But what I always kind of tell people is, hey, you know, honestly, it's really difficult to even be successful at that because there's so few and they're so competitive and there's appraisal gaps. But what I always try to tell people is like, look, you want to save the taxes, but let's also consider the long-term implication of this. And so if you can spend, even if you don't do it right away, if you buy something with potential that you can add X, Y, or Z, or if you can, you know, or you come in and you spend like a little bit of money to do a redesign, or you add a few amenities in the backyard just so that, you know, because what nobody wants to do, nobody wants to keep funding the business, right? They want it to pay for itself. So yeah, but we do have services, you know, like there's great designers and install companies and all that, depending on how kind of complicated you get with the build out. You know, most people, interesting thing about people that, again, it's a financial instrument, is they don't really want to manage the property themselves, right? They're not going to come out here and assemble furniture that gets delivered from Wayfair. So there's a whole ecosystem of people that have come up. And I think that's a great opportunity for like co-hosts as well. And, you know, because people really want a turnkey solution across the board.
Yeah. So 2 more questions. Let's get this so really you can put a bow on this for people. Why now? Why is it such an interesting and possibly opportune time to invest in the Poconos right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with the fact that, you know, the market's just going from kind of underappreciated to, you know, appreciated. And you don't find that opportunity often, right? Like, you know, like we were talking about those property prices in 2020, you know, where in the Poconos has gone from a full, you know, a complete 180 from, hey, this isn't a really interesting market to, hey, this is like one of the best markets so you can invest in for this particular asset class. And so you're really riding that momentum. I mean, I think the short-term rental industry as a whole is riding the fact that like its cap rates are kind of compressing for the entire asset class as well. But and then you add on top of it the tax benefits, right? And so that's a unique combination that doesn't come along very often. Because I think, like, you know, I think about it like the multifamily industry before interest rates went up, right? Like when you see that, you know, because those cap rates, right, they're going to stabilize, or maybe we'll go through recession or something. But there's nothing in the forecast right now that says that's the case. If you can drive you're kind of at that golden phase of the cycle where, you can get in now and just ride that cap rate up.
So for anybody listening, anybody who believes you like we believe you that the Poconos is a great market to invest in, how can they get in touch with you, Michael?
I'm on Facebook, just facebook.com, MV Klein, and as in Michael, V as in Victor, Klein. And then also STR Pocono. We have our own little site where we just hunt earmark deals. So if you go to STR, like short-term rental Pocono, .com, you can see some of the best deals in the market right now.
Nice. And then at the Savvy website, obviously they can contact you through there. So a bunch of ways to get in contact with you. We'll put your link also in any of the places we publish this so they can get in contact with you directly. Jeremy, did I miss anything?
No, I was just going to say, anybody that is listening or watching and is thinking about buying Poconos, definitely reach out to Michael. Regulations is a thing to navigate out there for sure. And you want the expert like Michael helping you do it, so you don't end up buying that wrong property. And I think this was awesome.
It's amazing how like 52 minutes flies, man. We just covered 52 minutes. That's amazing. But awesome, Michael, talking. It's great to meet you. I know you and Jeremy have worked together. It was my first chance to meet you. Look forward to growing a relationship with you. Look forward to seeing you in August when I come to the Poconos. Looking forward to walking through your property. We could take a few videos of that. It might be a pit. Might be a pit at that time. He'll be up. Well, that's awesome. Hey, I know we said at the beginning of this broadcast, this episode, but tune in next week when Jeremy and I talk about how we got our first client. I can't wait to discuss that in detail. And again, Michael, thank you. And is there anything that you'd want to, any parting words, anything that we forgot to ask you, or anything that anybody should know about?
No, I don't think so, guys. I mean, I appreciate it. And yeah, please do hit me up in August. It might be a construction site, but you'll at least have a view. So
that'd be awesome. All right. Thank you all for listening in. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, guys.